This video is about creating a central tension and using it to make your campaign and your setting better. Welcome to Tabletop Sandbox, where we talk about all things ttrpg. I am not a politician, but I'm also not a public speaker. Also known as Harrison Tarr. So, what is a central tension? Well, if you haven't seen it yet, I would highly recommend that you check out Matt Colville's video, which is the first in his politics series, that explains exactly what a central tension is. And most of my concept of what it is and what I mean when I'm talking about it comes from that video. In that video, though, it's unclear whether Matt is talking about making this central tension central to the campaign of the players or merely central to the world or the setting that the campaign takes place within. Now, it could be argued that those are the same thing, but for a couple important reasons, when I talk about the central tension, I want to clarify that it is not the central tension of the campaign. That is to say, not the central tension of your player's story. Not necessarily, at least. Because what your player's story is about should be up to them, and should be a result of the decisions that they make in-game and the roles that determine the outcomes. This harkens back to a video I did a while back talking about prepping the world and not the story, that you can check out linked in the description. The first step is creating a central tension, but how exactly do you do that? Well, the easiest way is to take two opposing factions in your setting and bring them into conflict with one another. In fact, I would highly suggest using a war, unless you find that really disinteresting or you have a much better idea. This is something that you could definitely steal from history, and you should at least steal ideas from history to make this seem believable in your world. But you don't have to go into all the minutiae of making your central tension as developed and complex as a central tension that actually happened in history. It only has to seem complex and pervasive, and I'll tell you how to achieve that effect. The two or maybe three main ways that you can use the central tension to improve your campaign and campaign setting are this. First, random encounters and environmental storytelling. That's the one, maybe two, because I feel like random encounters viewed from a certain angle can be environmental storytelling. The second is world building, and specifically determining faction motivations. So, to break down that first one, random encounters and environmental storytelling. A common example that has been used in videos by both Baron Durop at Dungeon Masterpiece and Icarus Games is Skyrim. The central tension of the world is the war between the Imperials and the Nords, and the random encounters that affect the story and populate the world, like running into a group of, what are they called? Oh no, I bring shame to my family as a nerd. Stormcloaks that are escorting a prisoner. Even if the player or Dragonborn doesn't decide to directly interact with the Civil War quest line, they're going to see the effects of it around the world in those ways. And random encounters in a D&D game are a great way to do something similar. These could be as blatant as soldiers from one side of the war, but it could be something more subtle, like a village that is running low on crops because they've had to give extra to the king to feed his armies. These are details that can engage the players and actually affect them, even if they're not engaging in the central tension's main storyline, if you will. If they come to that village that has had to pay twice or 5 times the normal amount of tribute to the king in crops, then the food there is going to be highly overpriced, or maybe they won't even be able to get some because people only have enough to feed their families. This is also an excellent place to interject the themes of your central tension into the random encounters and the world. It doesn't have to be just the in-fiction. If you're interested in exploring themes like law versus order, I said law versus order, that's a show, law versus chaos, or order versus chaos.
Order and chaos.
Or good versus evil, then those themes, and that really should be as simplified as you can make your central tension, just to 2 words, 2 concepts, those themes can also be included in your random encounters. Going back to our example village, if most of the capable people are away fighting the war, the people who remain behind are people who shirk their duty and might take advantage of the weakened state of the village. You might have someone who is ostensibly, or by title, law enforcement, who is actually using their position to bully the village people into paying extra taxes to pad their specific coffers. This would be a great encounter to include, or really a quest hook to include, if you'd like to explore the concept of selfishness versus selflessness in people. A lot of what I have conceptualized about creating random encounters tailored to the setting that you are creating comes from Baron Durop's video on Skyrim, and he has another great video on random encounter tables, both of which will be linked below. Next up, we have how the central tension can improve your world building, and actually, it makes it a lot easier. First, it helps you develop factions. So if you have your 2 big factions at war, and I'm going to be using a setting that I've been developing, the Adravian Empire, who is expanding outward into the Golden Wasteland, otherwise known as Tokahiri, and they are trying to take the gold, the resources, from the local Krenari population. They are ostensibly asking to buy it from them, but we all know how that goes with imperial expansion. Eventually, they're just going to try and take what they want. This central tension between the Adravian Empire and the Krenari people establishes 2 factions already: the White King and those who support him and the sovereignty of Tokahiri, and the Adravian army, who is half settling, half invading Tokahiri. But these 2 factions gave me the idea for a third: soot sellers. The White King of the Krenari has declared that no one except for people he has given specific permission are to trade with the Imperials. But the Imperials have steel of a quality that the Krenari simply cannot achieve. And so, the soot sellers are those people who are functioning in a black market of sorts, where they come and, under the radar, sell to Imperials. The central tension can help you create factions, but it can also help you define factions who already exist in your world. An easy way to do that is to interrogate their relationship to the central tension. How does this faction feel about the war? Are they more favorable towards one side or another? Or do they not really care? Do they like the war as long as it's going on because it improves their trade? Or is it making it hard to get resources that they need? It should be fairly easy to create a detail relating to each faction's goal tied to the central tension. And then every time your players run into a faction, they're reminded of the central tension by that faction's goals, what they're trying to achieve. It basically makes your whole world reinforce this idea of the central tension, even if your players don't directly engage with that central plot. Like I said, it doesn't have to be the main plot of your campaign, but it makes the world more interesting and creates complex feeling encounters and details about the world that are plain to see for your players without lore dumping on them. And it will actually get your players more interested when the world around them and their personal goals are impacted by this central tension. It'll get them more interested in asking questions about your lore and the stories that are going on, that if you're anything like me, you have a lot of knowledge about, but doesn't really necessarily tie into the players and what they're specifically doing. It's just cool ideas you had and added to your world. Now, I have it on good authority that if you subscribe to my channel, then your DMing will improve by at least 5%. And you can trust me, because as a politician, I would never lie to the American people. Good night, mortals.